What if the reason reality feels unstable lately isn't because the world is falling apart, but because you're starting to see it for what it really is? Something happened inside Google's quantum lab that shouldn't feel possible. Not in the Hollywood sense. Not explosions or glowing portals. Something far more unsettling. A quantum chip, no bigger than the palm of your hand, began producing results that classical reality could no longer keep up with. Not because physics broke, but because our intuition did. And that distinction changes everything. For most of your life, you were taught that reality is solid, predictable, mechanical. Cause leads to effect. Time moves forward. Matter exists independently of you. But quantum mechanics has been quietly dismantling that story for decades, and now the technology has caught up to the theory. When machines begin operating inside the quantum field itself, inside probabilities, superposition, and uncertainty, they don't just calculate faster, they behave differently. They enter regimes where outcomes stop making intuitive sense, where simulation collapses, where prediction fails. And here's the part nobody prepares you for. When our machines can no longer fully simulate reality, it forces us to confront a deeper question about ourselves. Because the same assumptions we use to understand computers are the assumptions we use to understand the mind. You may have felt this before, long before you ever heard the words quantum consciousness or field theory, moments when time seemed to stretch or collapse, when intuition arrived before logic, when coincidence felt too precise to be random, when your subconscious mind seemed to know something before your conscious thoughts could catch up. Society tells you to ignore those moments, to rationalize them away. But quantum science doesn't dismiss them so easily. In the quantum world, observation matters. The observer is not separate from the system. Measurement doesn't just reveal reality, it participates in it. And that idea, once confined to chalkboards and academic journals, is now embedded in functioning technology. When a quantum processor interacts with the field, it doesn't behave like a passive object. It resonates. It responds. It exists in relationship. That should make you pause. Because if reality at its most fundamental level is relational, probabilistic, and non-local, then what does that say about consciousness? About awareness? About the way your frequency, your emotional state, your attention, might be interacting with the same underlying field? This is where the conversation stops being about technology and starts becoming personal. You're not here by accident. You didn't find this video randomly. People drawn to topics like hidden reality, vibration, and spiritual awakening are usually responding to something internal, a subtle mismatch between the story they were given and the truth they're beginning to sense, a feeling that the world operates on rules nobody fully explained, a quiet knowing that there's more beneath the surface. Quantum mechanics doesn't offer comfort, it offers honesty. It tells us that certainty is an illusion, that separation is incomplete, and that reality is far more fluid than we were taught. And when technology begins to reflect that same truth, when a machine can enter states we can't easily track, it mirrors the human experience of awakening, confusing, disorienting, expansive, irreversible. This is why so many people feel unsettled right now. Not because something has gone wrong, but because the old framework can no longer contain what's emerging. The frequency is changing. The way information moves is changing. The way we relate to time, identity, and meaning is shifting. And the mind, especially a subconscious mind, trained on outdated assumptions, struggles to keep up. But struggle is often the first sign of expansion. When the familiar dissolves, something deeper begins to surface. And the question is no longer whether reality is predictable, but whether it was ever meant to be. Because once you understand what's really happening inside that quantum lab, you start to realize the most profound implications were never about the chip at all. They were always about what this technology is quietly revealing about you, your awareness, and the reality you participate in every single moment. And this is where it becomes important to slow down for a moment. If this perspective resonates with you, if something in what you're hearing feels familiar rather than foreign, it's because these ideas aren't meant to stay abstract. They only make sense when they're explored together, gradually, with clarity and intention. This channel exists for that reason. Not to overwhelm, not to sensationalize, but to create a space where complex ideas about quantum consciousness, the hidden structure of reality, and the relationship between mind and field can be approached with depth and respect. Before we go any deeper, I want to invite you into that space in a very simple way. If you're still with me, take a moment to comment. I'm still here. It may seem small, but it matters. It tells me, and it tells the algorithm, that this conversation is reaching people who are genuinely engaged, people who are ready to look beneath the surface rather than scroll past it. That interaction helps this content reach others who are quietly searching for the same understanding. If you find value in this exploration, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel, not as a reflex, but as a conscious choice. Each action supports the growth of a community centered on awareness, curiosity, and thoughtful inquiry. It allows this work to continue and expand, reaching individuals who may feel disconnected, questioning, or on the edge of their own awakening without yet having the language for it. Sharing the video is equally meaningful. Knowledge like this only gains power when it moves, when it's passed along to someone who might need it at exactly the right moment. You never know who in your circle is sensing that reality isn't quite what it appears to be, or who is ready to understand their own experiences through a deeper lens. In the next part, we'll begin connecting what's happening inside these quantum systems to something far more personal, something you've likely experienced in subtle ways throughout your life, even if you never had a framework to explain it. And once that connection becomes clear, the conversation shifts in a way that changes how you see time, choice, and your place within this unfolding reality. Here's the unsettling part, and this is where the story stops being abstract and starts touching something deeper. For decades, the unspoken belief of modern science was simple. With enough power, a classical computer could approximate almost anything. Reality, no matter how complex, was assumed to be ultimately compressible, predictable, reducible. But quantum processors don't approximate reality. They behave like it. They operate inside the same probabilistic rules that govern the quantum field itself. Google Quantum AI didn't just build a faster machine. With chips like Willow, they built systems that enter states where complexity explodes so rapidly that classical simulation begins to collapse. Not because the laws of physics changed, but because our capacity to track them did. This is why so many researchers quietly say, reality feels broken. It isn't broken. Our perception is. When a quantum processor maintains coherence long enough to explore interactions between qubits at scale, it stops acting like a tool and starts acting like a mirror. A mirror reflecting how the universe actually processes information. Non-linear, relational, vibrating with probabilities rather than fixed outcomes. And that realization carries weight, because if we cannot reliably simulate what's happening inside these systems, we are witnessing a kind of black box reality unfolding in real time. Effects appear before intuition can explain them. Results exist before understanding arrives. This tension isn't new. You've felt it before, even outside science. Moments when your subconscious mind seemed to move faster than logic, when perception shifted before explanation, when energy, frequency, and emotion appeared to shape experience in ways you couldn't fully articulate. Quantum computing simply makes that uncomfortable truth visible. It shows us that beneath the surface of the material world lies a reality structured by vibration, coherence, and interaction. A hidden architecture where observation matters and certainty dissolves. If this resonates, it's because consciousness itself behaves the same way. Expansion of awareness rarely feels clean or predictable. It feels disorienting, layered, sometimes unsettling. That's not a failure of understanding. It's a signal of transition. And this channel exists for people willing to sit with that tension instead of avoiding it. If you feel aligned with this exploration, take a moment to like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment with what this idea stirs in you. Engagement isn't about numbers here. It strengthens a community focused on awareness and shared inquiry. In the next part, we'll go further into what happens when this quantum logic collides with the way we experience time, choice, and the unfolding of our own inner reality. And yet, there is a reason quantum computers have not already reshaped the world, and it has nothing to do with a lack of intelligence or ambition. The true enemy has always been noise. The quantum world is extraordinarily sensitive. A tiny interaction with the environment, a fluctuation in energy, a shift in frequency, and the information begins to decay. In classical systems, error is an inconvenience. In quantum systems, error is existential. This fragility is why, for years, quantum computing felt like a beautiful but impractical dream. Power without stability is chaos. This is where the real turning point begins. and it's not the one most people expect. The breakthrough isn't about speed or raw quantum advantage, it's about reliability. Quantum error correction became the quiet obsession behind the scenes, the unglamorous work that determines whether a system can remain coherent long enough to be meaningful. When Google and collaborating scientists demonstrated that scaling a surface code logical qubit could actually suppress errors rather than amplify them, it marked a subtle but profound shift. Structure, rather than destroying quantum information, began to protect it. Coherence stopped being a fleeting miracle and started becoming something engineered. This matters far beyond technology. It reflects a deeper truth about the quantum field itself. Stability does not come from rigidity. It comes from alignment, from patterns that allow energy to flow without collapsing. The same principle appears in consciousness. A scattered mind amplifies noise. A coherent mind stabilizes perception. Fault-tolerant quantum computing mirrors the way the subconscious mind learns to integrate complexity without shutting down. When coherence increases, perception sharpens, frequency stabilizes, reality becomes readable in new ways. If this trend continues, the question is no longer whether these machines can run. It becomes something far more unsettling. What happens when a reliable quantum system begins to explore problems that reality itself is made of? When it models interactions that classical logic cannot compress? This is where the line between science and spiritual awakening begins to blur, because both are confronting the same realization. Reality may not be fully predictable, only participatory. If this perspective resonates, pause for a moment and engage consciously. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and add your voice below. This exchange strengthens a community built around awareness and shared exploration. And answer this honestly in the comments, because I read everyone. Do you believe reality is ultimately predictable or fundamentally unknowable? The direction this conversation takes depends on that question, and what comes next will challenge the way you think about control, perception, and the hidden structure unfolding beneath everything you experience. And now this is where the conversation quietly crosses a threshold and starts to feel unsettling in a different way, because this is no longer just theory. This is no longer confined to labs or simulations. Reports began to emerge describing Google running a new quantum algorithm on Willow, framed as a real step toward practical quantum computing. Not symbolic progress, not speculative promises, but performance in a specific task that classical methods could not realistically match. What made this moment different was not raw power, but verifiability. The results were no longer something you had to take on faith. They could be checked, tested, confirmed. Quantum output was becoming readable, and the instant a quantum system becomes both powerful and verifiable, it stops being a curiosity. It becomes an instrument, a new way of probing nature itself. Molecules, materials, chemical interactions, complex quantum dynamics that shape the physical world beneath our senses. This is why industries like materials science and drug discovery are watching closely, because quantum simulation does not simplify reality. It follows it. It traces patterns classical computation cannot easily see. And when that happens, a deeper discomfort surfaces. The real fear is not what these systems can compute. It is what they reveal. That reality may be layered in ways the classical mind cannot compress into clean narratives. That beneath what we perceive as solid matter lies a shifting field of probabilities, frequencies, and interactions. A reality that responds to structure, coherence, and alignment more than force. This mirrors the inner experience of awakening. When consciousness expands, old explanations stop working. Perception deepens. The subconscious mind begins to recognize patterns that logic alone cannot explain. Energy becomes felt, not theorized. Frequency becomes experiential. This is why quantum consciousness resonates so deeply with people on a spiritual path. It doesn't invalidate science. It completes it. It suggests that perception itself is part of the system, not separate from it. If this perspective is opening something in you, take a moment to engage. Like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. This exchange strengthens a community grounded in curiosity and awareness. In the next part, we'll move even closer to the edge, where quantum information begins to challenge how we experience time, choice, and the sense of a linear life unfolding in ways most people are not prepared for yet. And so the question quietly changes. Not did Google's quantum chip break reality, But did it expose something we were never prepared to face? It didn't fracture physics. It fractured the assumption that the universe must be understandable on our terms, filtered through linear logic and comforting explanations. Once you accept that reality can generate states your classical mind cannot fully track, you're no longer dealing only with technology. You're standing at the edge of a spiritual question disguised as science. What if consciousness isn't a passenger moving through a pre-written universe, but an active participant in how reality is experienced, shaped, and perceived? This is why this moment feels different. You've likely sensed it long before hearing about quantum processors or surface codes. Those moments when life refused to behave like a straight line, when intuition arrived before reason, when synchronicities aligned with such precision that coincidence felt like an insult to your intelligence. Quantum consciousness gives language to those experiences without reducing them. It suggests that the same field allowing particles to exist in multiple states is the field your awareness interacts with every day. The quantum field doesn't collapse into certainty until something observes, resonates, engages. Neither does meaning. The chip becomes a mirror, not because it thinks, but because it reflects how easily the universe escapes prediction. It shows that stability comes from coherence, not control, from alignment, not force. This is the same shift people feel during a genuine spiritual awakening. Old narratives dissolve, perception sharpens. The subconscious mind begins releasing outdated patterns as frequency changes. You don't become someone new. You remember something fundamental about how reality actually works. Energy flows where attention goes, vibration shapes experience, and awareness expands when resistance softens. This realization can feel unsettling at first because it removes the illusion of total certainty, but it also offers something far more powerful: participation. If reality is not, and before you move on, take a breath and recognize what's happening here. This isn't passive content. It's a shared exploration of quantum consciousness, perception, and the hidden structure of reality. When you like this video and subscribe, you're not just supporting a channel, you're helping this knowledge move through the field, reaching people who are quietly searching for clarity, expansion, and a deeper understanding of how energy, frequency, and awareness shape experience. That engagement matters more than most people realize, because it allows this conversation to continue and grow. If this resonated with you, leave a comment at the end with a simple phrase that reflects your state right now. Something intentional like, "I awaken," "I continue," or "I see beyond." These words anchor your participation and strengthen the sense of community forming here. And if someone in your life has been feeling that reality is somehow shifting or misaligned, consider sharing this with them. They'll understand why. The next video opens an even more challenging doorway, one that unsettles scientists and philosophers alike, because it questions something you've always assumed was solid: time itself. Stay with this journey, because what comes next changes how you see your past, your future, and the way this moment is actually unfolding.